keep it alive through these lines I write. I keep it live cause I thrive. I might just blow your mind tonight. I'm so hyped, but it's no hype. From this height, it's direct hits on sight. I'm your type, lend me your ears to show you that there's something in me. I'm not giving up, I'm standing right here, holding these days hostage. And I'll make this my year. We turning fear into love, and the love's in the air. I love doing this cause nothing compares. Nothing can share that same type of feeling when you feeling them flares. They can't catch it, it's havoc. I rip to a tear, switch a scenario. My stereos, I leave them impaired. Variables start to change and they're all in my range. I just gotta grab it, it's all mathematics. Every step is drastic, I make it fantastic. I'm trying to take your breath away. Asthmatic.
This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo.
Yeah, just nod your head with it, so explicit and vivid. Every image is intricate, intimate. I put my all into it, no scrimmage and no rules. I'm a pro tool, hear my heartbeat, beat into the vocals. I'm so loco, lost my mind, oh no. It's ponderoso, dope, so no overdose, cause it's dope, yo. Man, this is house grown, mixed with some milestones. So I let the style flow down like the Dow Jones, bringing it with some foul tones, letting the crowd know we getting loud, so it's eardrum rudiments. Yeah, we bring it rude again. Move, little hooligan. Music for tuning in. Full time to the 10. I'm on my clock like I told you. I'm doing this for dreams we pursuing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anti-Media Radio. Once again with your host Nick Bernabe here on UCY. Thank you guys for tuning in and welcome to the show. Make sure you check us out Monday through Friday. This is our last show of the week, but we have some other awesome hosts that are going to be bringing the info to you guys Thursday and Friday. SM Gibson, D Young, and Levon on Friday. Some really different points of view, and that's what we're all about, is bringing out all of the information. We don't all have to agree, and that's the lovely thing, and that's one of the things that we want to promote, is that we don't all agree. We shouldn't all agree. If everybody agreed, it'd be really boring. But the point is that we don't have to kill each other because we don't agree. And I think that's the point in society that we need to shift towards. Anyway, once again, thank you guys for tuning in. I'm also joined here by my co-host, DB Schwartz. How you doing tonight, man? Okay, DB can't hear me yet. Okay, I hope you guys can hear me. Let's make sure that we're all set up.
Yep, I'm on now, I think.
Okay, yeah, you're good. I hear you now. How's it going, man? What are you up to?
Hey, just watched that State of the Disunion and just the absolute craziness of it, and the two-faced bold lies being told, and it's propaganda at its best, man. I was looking at some of the quotes he was saying and kind of doing some of my own research, and most of the stuff he's saying is just outright blatant, obvious lies. But the one that really got me was the Ukraine thing about how we're going to go in and protect their democracy and Russia's economy's in tatters, when in fact what's going on is basically everybody who has money right now is buying the yuan, because the yuan is the only currency that Russia's accepting right now for their oil, and that's simply because it's backed by gold and Swiss banks. So you can be sure that some crazy repositioning of the economy is going on, and the State of the Union is it's trying to keep people calm before, the storm everybody's been talking about forever, except now it's kind of looking like it's starting to get pretty real here.
Yeah, a bunch of my liberal friends were, celebrating because they said it was a strong State of the Union. I still haven't watched it. I had planned on watching it today on YouTube, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. But I made a post last night, basically on my own personal thing. I didn't post it on the anti-media, but basically saying, what is the State of the Union? It's basically a politician, which is basically a talking head that's reading a script that someone else wrote, that's projected onto a teleprompter, that is broadcasted out to a bunch of middle-aged Americans that watch television, and they know the demographic that they're targeting, and they're able to say, oh yeah, everything's going great and everything's going good, because a lot of people that are in middle age and middle class, what's left of it anyway, are still pretty comfortable with what's going on. But the people that he didn't really address there, as far as I know, is the youth, man. And that's who we're trying to address, because the youth are the ones that are the mobilizers. The youth are the ones that are the backbone of movements. The youth are the people that are of fighting age. And they're frankly the people that aren't as brainwashed as the rest of these, 50 plus people that have been watching TV their whole lives. And so I don't care that much about the State of the Union, because it doesn't address me. It doesn't address the people that I'm, trying to connect with. And it doesn't address the disenfranchised people that have been oppressed by this entire system.
Well, now it might, because he actually made a couple of points, plans or talking points, whatever you'd like to call them. But, one of the main ones was, if you have the grades, you're going to get community college paid for. And that's all well and good. We've said before, we've touched on how education should be not only cursory, but state funded. But community college is a super tiny baby step. They anticipate it having a bill of $60 billion, which, I mean, you can imagine that doubling or even tripling easily. And when you think about it tripling up into that $200 billion range, well, $200 billion alleviates world poverty. So you can start to see how this is, again, government overreach, and it's never going to stop. It's a slippery slope, and it's going to be a money pit. And what's to say somebody doesn't go a year and a half, 2 years, get an AA, and AA really doesn't do anything for you anymore. So it's just slapping a Band-Aid on a massive 50 cal bullet wound, and it's stupid. And the second thing they're talking about was, we need to follow suit with Europe and give everyone high quality, affordable, and what they regarded as mandatory child services to watch people's kids, because everyone's working 40, 50 hours a week. And of course, that's going to lead to ever increasing indoctrination, first public school and now federal child care.
Yeah, man. And to me, exactly, I agree with you. It's kind of a everything Obama was talking about when it comes to education. And yeah, that is the one thing that is going to affect young people, besides this whole healthcare thing, because we all know that's a bullet to our heads. It's more of a government takeover once again of more schooling, man, and I agree with you that education should be more or less universal. Everyone should have access to it.
And it's a delayed bond kind of a grant, Nick, which means if you go in and say you go in for a year, right? And you finish all your classes, but you're on this 2-year plan, and this is a contract, mind you, and say you get hired at a good job, and they're like, hey, listen, you're on the hook for that other year. That student debt's going to follow you for life. And yeah, it may not be a lot, it may be a couple grand, but it's still, I mean, it's all going to be cumulative. And like people were basically saying, what's an AA going to do for you? There's a few jobs you can get with an AA, but there's not many. And they're almost all in healthcare, and healthcare is getting just oversaturated now. So what are we going to do? I mean, the job market's got to readjust to creative jobs. We can't all be doing robot jobs anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, a 2-year degree will get you a lot of technical, technical education and stuff. You want to learn how to fix cars, work on, be an electrician, stuff like that. We can't discount the value of those programs. But at the same time, if you look at what happens anytime the government goes in and takes over an industry, man, if Obama, what he's talking about is a takeover of the 2-year education, the 2-year college system, well, what happens every time they do that? Well, guess what? The price starts to inflate like hell. So at first it's like, okay, cool, well, these young people are going to get quote unquote free education, except 20, 30 years later down the line, when their kids are going to get free college, guess what? It's going to cost us what it costs people to get a 4-year degree right now. I mean, the inflation always hits any industry that the government goes into, and we see that with the healthcare industry right now. So that to me is what's pretty scary, and by all means, we need solutions to take care of the problem that exists, which is that underserved people in poverty, minorities don't have as much access to quality education as people that aren't in poverty. And I know for firsthand going to high school where I went to school, which was a pretty poor area. My education pretty much sucked. I mean, it was basically I was there to have social time and make friends. It wasn't really I didn't learn much. I learned more when I was ditching school out on the streets than I learned in class. And that's what happens when you're going to school in an impoverished area, and that's a huge
no resources.
And
There's
I
no
mean,
resources at
by all
all.
means, Obama is in theory he's going in the right direction by addressing that, but unfortunately, like you said, it's a band-aid that they're trying to slap over a huge gaping wound, and it's just going to probably make matters worse. Maybe not in the next 5 or 10 years, but in 20 and 30 years down the line. I mean, dude, there's
I
going to
don't
be
think the
huge price
solution is
inflation.
centralizing education again and making it into a carrot at the end of a stick. And the stick is it's not going anywhere. Like we can have people taking classes through Harvard online for free. That's going to be superior education to anything at a community college level, but it won't count because it's not. There's all this criteria you have to meet. So I don't know where it's going to go. We're separating into the classism starting to become knowledge based now over everything, and of course that's all directly related to socioeconomic. If you have well-to-do parents who can give you support and pay your way through school, whatever, you don't need to worry about acing every test, and you can follow a passion. And it's just we've got to change the whole thing. The whole system needs to be rearranged somehow.
No. Yeah, man. I mean, it's a huge problem to tackle, and it's just a matter of how are we going to do it? Are we going to do it at the community level like we need to, or are we going to try to have this huge federal bureaucracy stick their hands into the education system even further? I mean, I guess that's the big question. So, I mean, anything else out of the State of the Union you want to mention before we move on into this other news? Because I really didn't watch it at all.
Yeah, I mean, one major point, and it was really telling. If you kind of know what's going on behind the scenes and listen to other kind of news sources, but he said, you know what, I want Congress to go ahead and give me support, give the military support, basically to declare war on ISIL, and it got kind of like a cursory applause. And it makes you realize, I mean, McCain's in the crowd, and he's probably working with these guys. Half the guys that are in the Congress and the Senate may be, working on the other side with them. So there wasn't really this boisterous applause to attack what they are saying is this massive terrorist army. And it's all these political infighting things going on that come up and bubble to the surface, and it's apparent by the body language. You look in the crowd, you can see some people really aren't clapping, and you're like, wait a minute, how are we not all on the same page as far as annihilating this group because they're a threat to civilization? What if they got a nuke? Something like that could happen, and here we got half of these dudes on the payroll of somebody else, and they're for them for some strange reason.
Well, a lot of it has to do with the military-industrial complex, and a lot of these guys, they like having these boogeymen. Like McCain, Lindsey Graham. I mean, they hear about a uprising, Islamic militant uprising, and their mouths start watering because it's like, oh, that's more money we get to make. In 5 years, it's going to turn into a regional war, and we get to go in and try to stomp out the fires. And then by stomping out those fires, we just create a bunch of other fires, smaller ones. And then we just have an endless supply of revenue generation because the government's going to keep on going in there and starting up these wars. And that's exactly, to me, I mean, ISIL is a huge problem. I mean, this whole idea that people are killing people to tell them how to live, I mean, it's a horrible idea, and ISIS is just the latest reincarnation of it. But if you look back, it's that same philosophy that the U.S. was using to justify our attack into Iraq in the first place. When we knocked out Saddam Hussein, which basically set the stage for ISIS to even exist. Because if it weren't for our mentality of trying to tell other people how to live down the force of a gun, down the barrel of a gun, then there would never be such thing as ISIS, which is telling people how to live down the barrel of a gun. And it's all tit for tat. Anytime we do this kind of foreign policy, we can always expect blowback. And a lot of people just don't want to accept that. But it's like that saying, for every action there's a reaction, and it couldn't be more true. We do have a caller on the line now from 917 area code. How's it going? You're on the Anti-Media. What do you want to talk about?
How you doing? Yeah, I'm just tuning in. I'll join in as you guys go along. I missed you the last couple of shows.
All right, cool. Yeah, feel free to stay on the line. Please mute your phone when you're not speaking, but feel free to chime in whenever you feel like it.
No problem. Thank you.
So yeah, in my opinion, this fight with ISIS, it's like an ideological fight. but it's unfortunately a very similar ideology that runs this country, at least the establishment.
But it's important to figure out and do your own research and find out who exactly it is that's fighting them and who exactly it is that's arming them, because they're both coming from this country, as insane as that sounds. And you have to understand the military is fighting them and other organizations are arming them. We're funding both sides, strangely enough, within our own fight. And it's never been more apparent that this is a corporate game, dude. It's just a shell game, man. There's nothing over there to fight over. Everybody's already got their territory, unless they're trying to out Assad, which it sounds to me like he's dug in. And maybe we may even make some kind of weird alliance with him now and try to buy him off of Russia's, payroll. I have no idea, man. But ISIL it's a private army. It has no national anything. It's comprised of a lot of guys from Chechnya, which is strange enough, and maybe they're kind of trying to circumvent Putin in that way. But it's just it's a crazy, crazy thing. And to hear him say that and then have half the people not even really, respond, it was really telling.
We have an article that's scheduled to go up in about 30 minutes on the Anti-Media Facebook page. It's actually a few months old, written by Aaron Nelson, one of our awesome journalists. He's also the founder of the Pontiac Tribune, which is another great publication. But it's an article about this study that came out of London that showed that a lot of the weapons that were over there blowing up in Iraq and Syria are American weapons. And they came from Libya. They came directly from the CIA when we were funding the quote-unquote moderate rebels in Syria. And on the other side of things, you got Assad, who's basically propped up by the Russians. And so we don't want to mix up what Syria truly is. It's a geopolitical proxy war that's being fought over resources, more or less, at least in my opinion. And that's the saddest part of it all, is that there's just hundreds of thousands of people that are now dead in Syria, and then there's millions more displaced that have had to flee. And we're talking about these guys are fleeing into Iraq because Syria is so bad. Iraq, you think Iraq's okay? You think Iraq is a vacation? No, Iraq is messed up too, but it's so bad in Syria that these guys are fleeing into Iraq. They're fleeing into Yemen. They're fleeing into Turkey. And these are all places that have their own problems. But that just goes to show you how messed up it really is in Syria. Yeah. And unfortunately, it's not the people in Syria's fault. It's the superpowers playing little war games within their border, and unfortunately hundreds of thousands of innocent victims are made from that.
It's a really important chess piece to claim, like, if you think about it, because if you had Iraq and you had Syria and you had Afghanistan, well, then you have the whole Middle East, because Saudi Arabia is your puppet. So if we control Syria too, man, we have the whole world's oil reserves.
The other thing is that Syria is like a bridge to Europe, is the bridge to Europe too from the Middle East. So all those resources that are trying to find a market in the Middle East, they have to go through Syria, through Turkey, and then up through South Europe to get that oil to where it needs to go. And we're starting to see now. You told me a few days ago, and then I saw it in the news in some of the websites that I watched were covering it. Was that Russia decided that they were going to start cutting off heating gas to a lot of Europe.
And it's being catastrophic, and that's what's not being told. This is being whitewashed in the Western media, is that people are starving inside of their apartments, -20, -30 inside of their apartments, because all the heating gets cut off, and you're barely any better than being outside. So people are dying, man. There's elderly dying. There's children that are freezing overnight, and babies. Because if you're very vulnerable, this will take you out pretty quick. And nobody's talking about it. And this is in itself a response to, like we were talking about on Monday, the sanctions that hit most of the Middle East. And not only the Middle East, there's other countries that are being affected. Russia's even being affected, although they can grow a lot of food. So it's just, you can't play these games and expect other countries not to respond in kind. And who pays? Always the civilian population, and they're totally unprepared.
Yeah, man, and it's kind of a reality check to see what our policies are actually doing, and all this fear mongering that's going on with Russia and all this positioning. It's killing people. I mean, not only in Syria, not only in Ukraine. Those are the two obvious ones which aren't really being talked about. But now
what about Venezuela? Has anybody seen what our sanctions have done to them? We've collapsed their economy through our games with Saudi Arabia and lowering the price of a barrel of oil to the fact where they can't pump it out of there. And their entire economy is predicated on it. So what's happening in Venezuela? Martial law with a 6 p.m. shoot-on-site curfew. Can you imagine what's going to happen in that country in a couple more weeks from this?
Yeah, and the sad part of it all is that sanctions are typically used by the people in charge, whether it's a dictator or a government or whatever. The sanctions are used to solidify their power, man. Because then they're able to say, oh, well, the reason our economy is bad is because these damn Americans keep on putting these sanctions on our bank and all this stuff. So they don't have to take blame. The country doesn't blame them for all the problems. They're able to sit there and say, oh, yeah, it's the Americans that are causing it all. And in many ways, I mean, they're right. I met some Venezuelan people when I was down in Mexico a month and a half ago or so. And, we get to talking, and at first they didn't know I was an American. They thought I was Mexican. And anyway, we get to talking, and they're like, man, you're nothing like what we thought Americans were like. We heard that you guys are a bunch of arrogant, greedy assholes that go around trying to conquer the world. And, and I told them, like, unfortunately, our government does do that stuff. And it's to the displeasure or the disapproval of many average Americans like myself. And eventually I made friends with these guys, and they were like, yeah, you're cool, man. We have no problem with you, but, we hear a lot of bad stuff about Americans in general. And I told them, I'm like, you know what? I hear the same thing about Venezuelans because our media tells us a bunch of stuff that is not true about the Venezuelan people, and it makes them out to seem like they're non-human or that they are, they just are demonized, just like Iranians are demonized. Have you ever met an Iranian person in real life? They're some of the nicest people you'll ever
they're the best.
meet.
They're the Persian Empire, man. They're one of the most cultured people you'll ever meet. And they have a lot of higher education paid for by their government. So it's you can't really consider them, they can't paint them as the barbaric, like the Arab countries or whatever. They can't play that same game. But, man, people are the same pretty much everywhere. It's the upper echelons, the elites of these countries that are the crazy-ass tribal psychos that are the ones that keep fighting these wars.
Yeah, man, and I got to talking to these guys about their political philosophies and stuff, and I asked them straight up, I'm like, hey, so are you guys communists? And they're like, man, like we don't really care about what it is you call. He's like, as long as people don't tell us what to do, and we don't want to tell anyone else what to do, and then I've found a common word which I was trying to communicate, and I forgot the name for it, but liberty. And they understood that. They're like, oh, libertad, or I forget how they said it, but when I said that, they were like, yeah, that's what we want. That's what we want. And so it's one of these things. It's like people around the world, for the most part, are pretty good people. Now, are there people that can get propagandized and turned into a herd mentality like Nazi Germany or like these patriotic Americans that are eating up this American Sniper movie? Yeah. But in general, like if you take out a lot of those variables, the propaganda, the group mentality and stuff, I mean, people are typically pretty good, man. They just want to, have their family, have their privacy, and, have a way to make a living, and that's about it.
They just want to have enough for their families and not be constantly in fear and have belief that the people that they're entrusting with the power are doing things for their benefit, which is obviously the opposite here, which is why I don't know how much longer we can stand that. But you go to a country like Northern Europe where, the Scandinavian countries take half of everything you earn, and you never, ever see people revolt over that tax rate because they got all their important stuff provided for with no problem. And it's fine if you do that. That's the way the government should function if you're going to have heavy government. Heavy government should be providing it all. But if it's taking all your money like we are and just going to war with it and really anticipating eventually huge blowback and not preparing for you but for them, I mean, that's just insane to go along with that kind of plan and that kind of strategy.
Yeah, it really is. It's like the definition of insanity. It's like you said, I mean, the governments in Northern Europe, Western Europe aren't perfect by any means. But they do have most of their taxes. They tax very heavily. They tax about half of what you make. And for many Americans, you still get taxed about half of what you make, especially if you're poor. But you don't get the services that come back. It's like, all I get for all my taxes is a huge police state and a military industrial complex. You know, I don't have free college. I don't have free electricity. I don't have help on my rent and all
You're
that stuff.
forced to purchase healthcare at a monopolistic rate or be fined.
Yeah, man, and most of these countries in Northern Europe actually have universal health care. You know, where everybody has free health care. Yeah, they're taxed for it, but they actually get it. Unlike here, it's a whole different thing. It's just like, okay, well, if you don't get it, then you're in big trouble. You know, so it's not like universal health care; it's compulsory health care, and that's the big difference. And I am not a fan of heavy government. I'm not a fan of government controlling healthcare or anything like that. But to be blatantly honest, man, I would prefer a Scandinavian type of government over what it is that we have now, which is a total oligarchy, you know, and the people are being sucked dry, but they're not getting the rewards from paying into all of these systems. This money is just getting swindled and blown and given to their corporate cronies or just being wasted in a bureaucracy. I mean, look at the VA system.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's just the corporate structures are different. Like, if you were to go over to those countries, you'll see that a CEO would make about 10 times what somebody making the minimum would make. Whereas in the U.S., it's 220 times, man. Like, you can't have a board of directors making sometimes billions of dollars a year in bonuses and expect anybody underneath, you know, maybe upper management to have any kind of a lifestyle or benefit package. And it's just ridiculous. And that's what it boils down to. Big corporations pay no taxes. They give huge bonuses to board members. They don't pay anyone except upper management, even a competitive rate on the world market. And they will fire you when you turn 50. I mean, on the clock, 15 years before you're eligible for anything that you might have as far as a pension would go. So it's a totally backward system. It's going to eventually lead to nobody wanting to work for any huge corporations anymore. They'll have to break up into these mini corps, and they'll try to entice people. But, I mean, everybody's going to know what you used to be. And people are going to just want to start up things. I think eventually we're going to see all sectors go small again because you're going to make more money.
Yeah, you know, I recently went to Birmingham, Alabama to visit SM Gibson and D Young, which are our other two hosts on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I went down into Birmingham, and you know, the last time SM was there, he had just moved back a month before I went to visit him. But last time I saw him when he came out here to San Diego to visit me, he was telling me, you know, how much of a shithole Birmingham was, and how messed up the place was. But you know, when I went out there, he was just telling me how much it's changed from the time that he had spent away. He spent like over 10 years away from Birmingham, and he just moved back a few months ago. But one thing I noticed, and I found out when I was hanging out down there and talking to some people, is that craft beers were outlawed in Alabama. You couldn't have a brewery in Alabama, basically. So there was basically you can get Bud Light, Budweiser, you know, Coors Light, and Miller, and that was basically it up until 4 years ago when they changed the law. But what I noticed is that ever since that law got nullified or whatever you want to call it, all of a sudden there's this huge beer economy blowing up in Birmingham. And there's a bunch of breweries, there's a bunch of bars that stock a bunch of local beers, and they're all booming.
Yep.
You know, and it just goes to show what happens when the government can like kind of get out of the way. And it runs contrary. I heard a few clips from Obama's speech, and one of the ones I heard was where he was basically saying that, you know, it's time for people to stop worrying about, you know, the government just getting out of the way of businesses. It's time for the government to go in and really work together and help businesses out. But my economic thinking kind of runs contrary to that. I don't think that the government should be in there meddling in with businesses, because when the government does that, it always creates a conflict of interest. It's kind of like that famous solar panel company that went out of business. I think it was called Solyndra, right?
Yeah, Solyndra was like Enron, where they kept pretending how much they can get cheap panels from China, and then China had an environmental disaster, and they had to cut their production down a lot, and they couldn't satisfy. But what's gonna happen, Nick, with like these microbreweries is it's spurring things like micro bakeries and wineries and eventually micro farms, and that's gonna lead to people going around And up here, especially because it's windy and it's on the plains, installing, windmills and solar panel arrays. And when you get into all these things where you can start doing that, it leaves really only water as a something to worry about, where you're going to have micro economies off of the main economy. They don't need to be attached at all. That's going to lead to a renaissance if it doesn't get derailed by all this legislation they're trying to push through. And it'll lead to you can live in a community of 50,000 people all spread out with all these micro businesses providing all of the services you might need.
I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah, exactly. That's the direction we need to go, is decentralizing everything, including the economy. And we talk about energy all the time. And like you were saying, there's great jobs. And that's one thing that you could really make use of at a community college, man. A lot of these colleges have technical training for installing alternative energy projects, like solar panel installation and stuff like that. You can learn that at a community college for cheap as of right now. But, we did a story on the Anti-Media just a couple of days ago. Jonathan Schoenfeld wrote it. I wasn't going to talk about this because it wasn't really national news, but it is a really cool idea. And considering that we're talking about alternative energy, this company called Plant-E, Plant-E, is making, they're basically figured out a system where you can harvest electricity from your garden, from your plants. And basically what happens is when the plants go through their whole process, photosynthesis, all that, they make sugars. The plant technically only uses half of the sugars that it creates. The other half gets excreted through the roots. And so what these guys have done is they figured out a way to use that sugar that gets excreted, and there's bacteria that break that sugar down, and it has to do with the electrons. I'm not that technical with it, but anyway, they're able to get the sugar from the plants that are naturally excreted. The bacteria makes a chemical reaction, and they're able to harvest electricity from this chemical reaction. And
right.
So what they were talking about is that you could literally, once this, we're talking about maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, once they get really good at this technology and it becomes cost effective, you'll be able to charge your cell phone with a 5 by 5 meter garden. So you can make your food and your electricity at the same time. I mean, it completely blew me away.
Yep.
So the next story we're going to go to here, and I'm sure we're probably going to get some callers on this because there was a lot of people that got angry. We have one of the newest articles up on the antimedia.org right now. It's called "The Real American Sniper: Why Chris Kyle Wasn't a Hero." And this is all the rage right now. A bunch of patriotic Americans have gone to the movies to watch this movie called American Sniper. And it's basically, I haven't seen it, but from people and from the articles that some of our journalists have written, basically it glorifies the war in Iraq and it glorifies killing people. And the movie basically made this Kyle guy out to be a nice guy when the reality of it, according to his book, to his own writing, this guy was pretty much had no regret. He knew that he killed children and women, no regrets for it. Because in his mind he was killing bad people and it was good versus evil or whatever. But this article, and we kind of touched on it a little bit ago as far as ISIS and that whole situation. But what S.M. Gibson actually, the point that he made in this article, especially about Iraq, is that we never really had a moral justification to be in Iraq. It turns out that Saddam Hussein wasn't behind 9/11. It turns out that he didn't have weapons of mass destruction except for the ones that we gave him. And then when we found them, the Bush administration covered it up because they didn't want people knowing. So the only weapons of mass destruction that we found in Iraq are the ones that we supplied the guy, that he used on his own people, the Kurds, and that he used on Iran back in the 80s. So a lot of what people are saying about this whole Chris Kyle guy, the sniper and the movie, people are getting very patriotic about it, and unfortunately this movie is turning out to be very much anti-Islamic propaganda, because if you look at some of the tweets that people are saying after they watch the movie, it's I hate Muslims 1,000 times more, and I love the American military 100 times 100 times more, and it's sooner or later, people are going to have to break down and realize, that a lot of what's being fed to them is propaganda. And of course, here at the Anti-Media, we talk about this stuff all the time. We talk about the media, the way the media can change a narrative. And they've done a pretty wonderful job at making this Chris Kyle guy out to be a hero, when the fact of the matter is he was pretty much an animal that got off on killing a lot of people. And, a lot of people that are just kind of blindly patriotic are attacking us for making this post. But I guess the opening line of this article is pretty much gets it right on the hits the nail on the head. It's a reality that's unpleasant to hear. To understand that your tax dollars are going to kill children.
And Jesse Ventura called him out on it. And Kyle pretty much knocked him out because Jesse Ventura is an older guy, and he won $1.8 million from the guy. So he won in court, and the guy he was a mercenary through and through. He got done with his tour. He came back and he started doing things the government actually didn't like, which was teaching people kind of survival tactics and advanced warfare kind of stuff. But when his friend took him out in a drunken shooting range accident or whatever the case may be, because that was a little shady too. He was just a problem, and he's being demonized. Was he what the film portrayed? Not quite that cold-blooded, I don't believe. I believe he was more of a mercenary type, not so much of a psychopath in reality. But whatever the case may be, he's a guy that's definitely polarizing. And he's bringing out the worst in some of these morons that are totally buying into it and drinking the Kool-Aid, but also actually making people try to understand what his life was really about.
Yeah, man, I wanted to...
Portrayal was
go ahead.
I saw the movie myself the other night, and what you said earlier, the blind patriots are literally, I reposted your article, and people are literally attacking me like, this guy's a hero, X this, X that. And you when you say blind patriotism, it resonates because it's like, these guys don't even know the story behind the story of American Sniper. They don't know why we were in Iraq. It's just like, oh, we were killing terrorists and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, America indeed was the aggressor toward Iraq, like you previously stated. You can't get through to these people. It's amazing to see. So that word is a good one there.
That's what fear will do, man. That's the fear. That's the patriotism is a response to fear. It's us against them.
Prior to the invasion of Iraq, there was over a 70% approval rating for the invasion. Okay, so we're talking about a massive propaganda campaign that really set this image into these people's heads. Okay, all Muslims are basically terrorists, except for the few that we get along with. Those guys are okay, like Saudi Arabia and stuff. Unfortunately, we all know the story about Saudi Arabia. Anyway, that brainwashing took a really good effect, man. 9/11 was the greatest brainwashing experiment of this generation. And
because
if you look
15
at it,
of the hijackers are Saudi Arabian.
Yeah, and
why didn't we go in there?
These guys are, this brainwashing is still ringing true. It's still strong. People are still buying into this crap.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, that's why, for me, if you think back right after 9/11, I mean, who was on the internet? Well, there was like people that were into tech, and then there was those 13-year-olds, those 14-year-olds like me that were on Yahoo Messenger.
AOL.
Yeah, AOL and all that crap. So back then, the internet wasn't what it is today, not by a long shot. So I think what we have now to our benefit, and the reason why the whole 9/11 propaganda was pulled off so cleanly and so smoothly, and oh my God, it's still in such effect today. It was a great piece of propaganda. I think it should be studied. But what we have today is a little different, man. We have a lot of people that have access to the internet that are able to question stuff. And I forget the latest polling number, but over half of the population thinks that there should be another investigation into 9/11, which just goes to show that people have questions. I don't want to delve into any conspiracy theories or anything like that because I don't know whether any of them are true. But people definitely have questions, and now people are finally starting to question the fact that these snipers are over there killing hundreds and hundreds of people. And it kind of goes to show, because if you look at the article that SM posted just, I don't know, 2 hours ago, it's already got 71,000 shares on Facebook and 16,000 likes. So, I mean, people want to see this information and they want to see the other side of the coin. And for that, I'm pretty optimistic, because I think that as time goes on, this questioning of why in the hell the world is the way it is going to increase. And, humans are naturally curious people, and they naturally question things. Think about it. I don't know about you guys. I don't have any kids, but I've had little brothers. And, kids are always going to contradict you and question you, sometimes just for the hell of it. But it's definitely a natural human behavior. And I think that now that we have this freer media, I don't want to say completely free, because it's actively they're actively trying to control it and censor it. But we have a more free media and more free communications than we ever had in the past. And that is changing the whole landscape of the propaganda ability that these guys are able to pull off. Now, have they had successes recently? Yes. They got us back into Iraq and into Syria with those beheading videos. Again, people have called into question the validity of those videos. I don't want to even speculate, but the fact of the matter is they worked. No matter what, no matter whether they were real or not, they worked. And it got us back into these wars. And so they do still have successes. Do they have pitfalls? Have they had failures? Yes. We stopped them the first time when they wanted to go in and try to just straight up overthrow Assad. We stopped them. We should have stopped them when they tried to do the same thing to Gaddafi, but we didn't. But we did stop them with Syria, mainly because we also had the Russian media on our side too, and that kind of helped put a backbone to this alternative media. Unfortunately, sometimes we have to, sometimes us and RT are on the same side, because they're trying to stop us from doing this crap too, and we are too. So that, I think, really helped. Now, this time against ISIS, it's a little different story, because ISIS was threatening the Iraqi regime, and the Iraqi regime, as of recently, is more aligned with Iran than it is with us. So, Iran kind of had a dog in the game, a dog in the fight when it came to Iraq this time. So they do have an interest in stopping ISIS. And of course, we know Russia and Iran are very close together. So if Iran wants to do something, Russia's not going to stop them. So this time around, the corporate media was able to use the propaganda and have a victory against us. So, I mean, we're in this battle, and there's constantly battles that are being won and lost, and we got to just tilt the scales in our favor.
And I was just going to say it's backfiring, man, because, they're getting ready for Hillary to run now. And in her own book that just came out, she pretty much admitted that we have funded and created them and have been doing so since 2004. So it doesn't matter what their name is. John McCain's been over there for 10 years training these doofuses, and it's their private military little arm of the corporate U.S., and now it's at war against our own military, dude. It's that insane.
We have another caller on the line now. In fact, I think we have two callers. So the guy from 917 already joined us. But we have someone from 336. How's it going? What do you want to talk about? You're live on the Anti-Media Radio.
Oh, hey. The one thing I want to talk about is one of the last guys who just talked about how we are naturally born with curiosity, how we always naturally question things as children. And my big thing is education and everything. I'm a big, advocate for unbiased education, for things that really just present the facts and everything. The problem with the modern education system is that we have, and I experienced this, is the children who do question, the children that do talk about things that may be out of turn or out of place, and they realize that something isn't right, that questioning gets beat the hell out of them. It's almost a Pavlovian kind of thing that is built into the institution itself, where a child questions and they question authority, and all of a sudden they're suspended, they're kicked out of school, they're sent to the principal's office. It's really frowned upon for a child to even look down on authority, period. If somebody telling you don't do that, if you ask them why, they're going to get mad at you, and that shouldn't happen. The fact that these kids are questioning, that's how we learn. Once they're trying to remove that curiosity, so you practically become a drone and just listen to whatever you're told.
Yeah,
It's
exactly,
insane.
man. Exactly. You're exactly right. And that kind of brings us back to one of the topics we were talking about at the beginning of the show. I don't know if you caught it, but I wanted to get your opinion on this. The proposal that Obama apparently was talking about in the State of the Union, keep in mind I didn't watch it, but from what I've read, and DB was telling me about it, is that he wants to start a program that's going to basically nationalize kindergarten, or not kindergarten,
Community college.
preschool,
Well, no, that
and community college.
it's going to federalize after-school childcare because it's going to provide stipends for them, and then it's going to provide basically federal funding for the first 2 years of community college if you earn it. But it's just going to open up a whole new wave of loans.
Yeah, exactly. For me, and not just loans. And honestly, personally, I'm an anarchist. I'm not going to drag that whole thing in there. But when you have to think about it. And so I'm not going to take the Republican approach and just go, oh, taxes, they're all bad and everything. As an anarchist, I don't like taxes, but there are things that I can legitimately say, this isn't a bad idea to tax for them. But the problem is, though, that when we get these community colleges, we're going to get taxed to all hell for it, and it hurts the middle class and the lower classes even more. We still won't be able to afford it because we are being taxed to hell, so we can't afford it anymore. So who's it really benefiting?
Exactly.
Who's it really benefiting?
For the next
because
5 to 10 years.
It's not benefiting the lower class. It's not benefiting the middle class. It's benefiting those who decided, hey, I want to start getting money to go to. So now, and I promise you, within 2 years, we're going to see like tons and tons of community colleges pop up that are going to do nothing. I mean, they're not going to do anything. They're just going to sit there and just become, what's the word? Degree farms for just useless degrees that don't teach you anything. If you want to get education, you have to pretty much do what Germany is doing. You have to pretty much say education is free. It has to be free. It has to be. I mean, you're not going to nationalize it and put a public agenda to it, of course, but it absolutely needs to be free, because how else are you supposed to inspire creativity or things like that? All the scientists we've lost, it's the brain. We've experienced. I'm in the programming field. We experienced the brain drain. We're pulling programmers from Europe. We're not breeding programmers. They're coming from Europe. They're coming from Asia. They're not coming from us.
So I have a quick point to make, and like you were saying, in 2 years, there'll be a bunch of colleges popping up. For 5 to 10 years, a bunch of people are going to get free education. But when in 20 to 30 years, when those people that got that free education, when their kids are starting to get education, we're going to be talking about a massive, massive, massive tax burden on the working people to pay for all this stuff. And like you were saying, because I'm in agreement with you, I believe in universal education, universal unbiased education. But the question I have for you, and hopefully you can help us out, is what can we do? What are some solutions, at least one solution, before we move on to the next caller, to start making a move in the right direction in education?
Well, you see, that's a really, really tough question, because education is not as simple as saying, here's the best way to do it. Because there's no clear and precise path we can say that teaches everyone. Where there's no way we can teach little Johnny and little Sam, where there's no way we can teach both of them the exact same way and they're both going to get the same out of it. Every child learns differently, and that's the difficult part. And honestly, what we should really be doing is really looking into research for this. Best ways to teach and everything. And, these open classrooms have a new idea where children can do as they please. They learn what they want, that sort of thing. And if you look at the way Germany does it, if you look at the way European nations do it, secondary schools, like elementary school, middle school, these places are used for finding interest in the children. And from there, they go on to learn about things that they want to do. And then it turns into their interest, and these things just begin into careers for them. That's when they go to college for these careers. And they're breeding engineers. Artists become artists. Engineers become engineers. So the whole point, it's not just from a primary education from college up. It needs to go from all the way down, from children up. It can't just start and just say, we're going to start doing this now. It just doesn't work like that. And that's the hard part about institutionalized education, is that not everybody learns the same. And it's a really difficult question that even scientists have yet to figure out and answer really what's the best way to do it. It's something we got to try and fail at.
What a novel idea, people actually going into professions that they like, learning about stuff they like learning about. And I know personally, I've got friends that have, career regret, and they regret the place that they ended up at working and the situation they ended up at. And that's one of the things.
That's a position that my own family members are going through as well. My brother, for example, wants to become a programmer like me. So right now he's stuck in something else, but he can't afford to do a career switch.
Yeah, exactly.
My dad wanted to be a teacher, but there's not enough money being made, especially in the state where I'm from, to even go into teaching. You can't survive off the income from that.
In Germany, if I'm not mistaken, if you're, say, 40 years old and your career is at a dead end and you get laid off and you want to do something else, you can go back, get room and board, right?
I don't know much about German domestic policy. However, I would probably say that's pretty close to it. Most European nations, they would probably offer you a pension. It would probably be considered taking an early retirement. I know, for example, in the Netherlands, when you decide to retire, you pretty much have almost $1 million coming your way from just government money given to you. And so I'm not sure how it would be. It might be like an early retirement in which you dig into like an income of some sort. Don't take my word for it. I'm just guessing here, which means I should probably stop saying because it's not really fact. But I would assume there would be some sort of early retirement, in which case you can dig into and probably go for a re-education and maybe a career change or something like that.
All right, man. Thanks, man. From 336, thanks for calling in. You're welcome to stay on the line. We got to move on to these. We have two more callers on the line. You're welcome to chime back in if there's anything you want to talk about. But the caller from 416, if you're still on the line, you're live on the Anti-Media. What do you want to talk about? All right, I'll come back to 406 in a minute. We also have a caller from 740. If you're on the line, you're on the Anti-Media. What do you want to talk about?
Hey, Nick.
Oh, sorry, we got 406 back. How's it going?
I'm sorry, I thought you said 416, so I was being polite. Hey, Nick, this is Heidi. How are you doing?
Pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing really well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to listen to you guys. I just wanted to say that, as always, I very much appreciate what you guys are doing and getting the media out there in the way that you do, and your thoughtfulness and conscientiousness is very much appreciated. I've been taking notes of the things you're saying. Do you go off in 8 minutes?
Yeah, we got about 7 minutes left.
Okay, good. Well, I'm going to go. I was taking notes on the different things you were saying, and I had comments on those different things. And one thing I just want to put out is probably the most important thing when I'm calling. Maybe at some point in time we could revisit the TPP again, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I'm not sure if you're aware or not about it coming back to life again right now, and it's coming back with full force. And
yeah, if I'm not mistaken, that's one of the things Obama tried to strike home pretty hard last night, was that he wants the Republicans to give him authority to sign the TPP and the TPIP. I think many of our listeners probably aren't aware. If you want to quickly go over what that trade agreement is all about and why it is that many activists and other people are kind of worried about this thing.
You bet. I'll try to nutshell it as best I can. Last night, in 37 minutes into the State of the Union speech, President Obama did ask for fast-track trade authority, which actually is not only against the Constitution, but anyone who supports fast-track really is stepping into the area of treason. Fast-track basically would allow Congress to shove through an extremely bad trade agreement, which is even worse than NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement that went in place in '94, which cost the United States incredible amounts of jobs that went overseas and down to Mexico and whatnot. And you track the history of NAFTA, it was very, very bad for the United States. And at this point in time, Obama is asking that for Fast Track Authority to push through a couple of new really bad trade deals that are like NAFTA on steroids. The first one is Trans-Pacific Partnership, or the TPP, which is with 12 nations dealing in the Pacific region. Some of the worst things about it, besides completely annihilating any protective regulations that we do have to protect the people, which would include food safety. We would have no idea where our food is coming from or the quality of it or whatnot, because those kinds of things could be called trade barriers. It would annihilate any of the laws that people around the nation are trying to get in, which is having our food labeled so that we know if it's genetically modified, which means also that it's completely covered with pesticides and whatnot. So last night, Obama asked for this. He asked for fast track, which would allow Obama to go out and negotiate to sign on the dotted line with these other 12 countries. Yes, we agree to this. He would come back and bring it to our Congress. And if they allow this fast track, what it would do would put handcuffs on our Congress. They would not be able to fully debate this massive 29 chapters that have been written over the past 5 years by corporate advisors. Now, you tell me corporate advisors who are writing 29 chapters of legalese in secret are doing something that's good for the people.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the past quote-unquote free trade agreements that we've had in this country have more or less just been corporate bailouts, right?
Oh, well, yes. It's corporate. Basically, yes, and it's setting us up. This one, this TPP, and there's another one that they'd like to shove in right after it, called the TTIP, which is the Atlantic version of this Pacific version, and then there's another one, the PISA, which is a service trade agreement dealing with the service industry. But the bottom line is these agreements are written by corporations, and they give corporations full reign. And it really does threaten the sovereignty of our cities, our counties, our states, and our nation, meaning this. If a multinational corporation comes in and they say, say Yellowstone, they could point at Yellowstone or the Grand Tetons and say, hey, there's gold up there. And you know what? In the Tetons, there really is. There's a mother lode of gold in there. They could say there's gold there and we want to drill. And we say, hey, no, you can't do that. We have laws to protect that. And they would pull out the TPP and say, look, that's a trade barrier. Your regulation saying it's a state, it's a national park, that's a trade barrier. And guess what? If you're not going to let us sue there or let us drill there or mine there, we're going to sue you for future profit losses. Future profit. So they could pull up statistics and saying there's these many tons of gold worth of these many billions of dollars, and we're going to sue you. And now it wouldn't go into national courts. It would go into a tribunal.
That led to Costa Rica actually selling off some of their most pristine rainforests for oil drilling recently.
Absolutely. So it's happening at a smaller scale right now, and that's because of NAFTA and WTO. So it is already happening at a smaller level. But if TPP is allowed, we will see a corporate coup that will come in and take over, and they will have their way with us, and there's nothing we can do. They can sue us for future profit losses. The taxpayers are the ones who would pay it. They would never have to drill for gold or whatever it is that they want. They could sue us for future profit losses, and it would come out of our taxpayer coffers.
And now the reason why Obama and these bureaucrats are able to kind of justify this bill is because, to me, what it basically sounds like, and I've done some reading into the TPP. We haven't talked about it in a while, and I'm glad that you called in and talked about the TPP because we haven't touched it in a few months. But to me, what it seems like is corporate colonialism, more or less. And the way that Obama and his Republican cohorts can more or less justify this thing is that, a lot of the corporate colonialism will benefit U.S. corporations. So in a place like, for instance, let's say Peru or Chile that signs on to this agreement, our corporations can do the same thing that their corporations could do in theory, which is go into the Amazon and say, oh, well, there's so much of this natural
Monsanto
resource.
in the Amazon, dude. Just think of that.
Yeah.
Right, but get this also.
Hey Heidi,
get
we're
this.
coming to the end here. Our music is
got
coming
it.
on. Thank you for calling in. Please call in our next show on Monday. Caller from 740. I'm sorry I didn't get to you. Please call in on Monday or call in tomorrow with SM and D.
I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo.
What time do I call